Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, we're taking a look at a very powerful core that helped me go 20-5 on the day today in the Open Great League, and that is the combination of Volt Switch, Shadow Magnezone, and Hakamo-o. Shadow Magnezone is incredibly powerful at sweeping teams if it even has a small energy or shield advantage, and Hakamo-o with its new move Brick Break giving guaranteed debuffs is incredibly consistent at farming things down in neutral situations. Add to that a Shadow Gligar safe switch, and you've got a team that is very potent even against Pokemon that hard counter it. Hopping into the first match here, leading Shadow Magnezone into Annihilate. Speaking of counters right off the bat, I'm going to safe switch into the Shadow Gligar. Opponent is going to respond with a Mandibuzz. This is honestly not a terrible spot to be in as the Shadow Gligar, as the Shadow Gligar does have significantly better damage output compared to the regular. I'm going to continue to farm up and fire off Aerial Ace after Aerial Ace in this matchup. Definitely not a bad thing to bait out the flyer, as that way I don't have to deal with super effective Aerial Aces on my Hakamo-o. They do have enough for the Dark Balls. I should barely be able to hang on here. It's going to be close. They end up baiting with the Aerial Ace. I can definitely survive that. And I'm going to fire off another Aerial Ace. The Aerial Ace does get shielded. Opponent wanting to keep switch advantage, but in doing so, they've now set up a massive farm for the Shadow Magnezone. And Shadow Magnezone up energy is just unbelievably scary. Even Pokemon that resist Wild Charge do not want to take a Shadow Wild Charge from a Magnezone. A Shadow Wild Charge does 50% to a Shadow Gligar. The damage output this thing has is just unbelievable. I'm going to fire off the Wild Charge. The Wild Charge will be shielded. Opponent switches into Charge-a-Bug. I'm going to bank a little bit of energy, send in Hakamo-o, and Hakamo-o just completely destroys Charge-a-Bug. Charge-a-Bug's energy is completely walled here. They're stuck going for X-Scissors because the discharge is also going to be single resisted. Hakamo-o, in this situation, I don't really need to go for the Brick Break. Shields are down, so I'm just going to go for the neutral Dragon Claw and continue to farm. Hakamo-o not quite able to get the full farm down as the Charge-a-Bug on 1 HP makes a last second X-Scissor. I get the farm down, and now I'm going to go for the Brick Break. A Shadow Wild Charge should KO anyway, but just to ensure it, let's lower their defense with the Brick Break. In comes the Shadow Magnezone, and despite a pretty tough lead, we're going to be able to take the win as Shadow Wild Charge KOs the Annihilate. Hopping into the next match, leading Shadow Magnezone into Lickitung. I'm going to go for the Wild Charge and Dip strategy. I either grab shield advantage or I deal massive damage. If you don't have a Hakamo-o, I did post a similar version of this team a couple days back with a Goodra as the third, and Goodra can put in some very nice work there as a fighter that has some pretty consistent neutral play into other fighters that Magnezone doesn't want to see. The Gligar safe switch baits out the Azumarill. This is another situation why having the Shadow on Gligar is an absolute must. Shadow Gligar has the ability to flip Azumarill with a small energy head start, whereas the regular Gligar cannot hope to do that. I commit the shield, I'm firing off the dig. I just don't want them to overfarm too much. If they throw their energy right away, that works for me. Opponent overfarms and plays to a CMP tie that they do not win. This dig gets no shielded, Shadow Gligar flips Azu, and in the back, it is Dragalge. Dragalge has a big energy head start, but I can send in Hakamo-o. Hakamo-o farming up. Lickitung is going to fire off the Body Slam. That's not a problem. Hakamo-o going to be able to absorb that damage. I'm going to bank a Brick Break, send in the Magnezone, snipe with the Volt Switch. I did take a look at Metal Sound, but Metal Sound is a pretty poor fast attack, and Volt Switch, to me, feels essential on the Magnezone, so I would not recommend running Metal Sound on the Magnezone with this particular team. The Aqua Tail is going to connect, that's going to let them get the farm down, but I have the Dragon Claw loaded on Hakamo-o, and that's just going to be game over. So a bit of an interesting lead there, as there's a massive bulk difference between the Magnezone and the Lickitung, but nothing wants to take Shadow Wild Charge. Moving into the next match, leading Shadow Magnezone into Guzzlord. Bit of an uncomfortable lead, as of course Guzzlord, due to the dragon subtyping, resists electric damage. However, again, I cannot stress enough how little Shadow Magnezone cares about typings. I'm just gonna fire off this Wild Charge. Wild Charge, they're already deep into the red. I can send in the Gligar. I could have gone for a Mirror Shot to potentially force a shield, and maybe that would have been a better play, but I decide I want to save the energy. In comes a Shadow for Alligator. I need to fire off this energy before they make it to the Hydro Cannon, so I'm only able to make it to the Aerial Ace. I'm still able to grab a shield from my opponent, however. They're going to farm up and play to the CMP tie. Hydro Cannon is going to pick up the knockout. I have the Wild Charge banked, and they don't have a second move here. They're very close, but they don't have the second Hydro, so I'm just going to send in the Magnezone. They have to give up the final shield or lose the entire Feraligatr. Goodbye, Feraligatr. I'm looking to switch into Hakamo'o. I still don't know what they have in back, but I have to reset my debuff. I farm down the Guzzlord. What do they have in back? It's a Lantern, and this is so over. Oh my goodness. I can go for the Brick Break. I mean, I do completely wall their energy regardless, but now their energy is walled and their defense is debuffed. Opponent realizes there is no winning this game, and they resign the match. We see an amazing lead in the next match, Shadow Magnezone versus Skarmory. Opponent safe switches into Annihilate. I'm going to respond with the Shadow Gligar. Even if they have Ice Punch, I will be able to survive this, so I decide to let this through. It is just the Night Slash. I really didn't want to go down a shield, shielding a Night Slash, and then be in a position where I'm super healthy and my opponent just gets unlimited farm on the Skarmory. My opponent is going to get nice farm on the Skarmory, but the good news is I'm not down a shield. So I should hopefully be in a pretty good spot with Hakamo'o in the endgame. I'm going to be farming up quite a bit of energy and going for the dig. The dig is going to connect onto the Skarmory and get the Skarmory pretty close to the red health. In comes the Magnezone. Magnezone not going to be shielding the Brave Bird and looking to queue up the switch into Hakamo'o. In the back, it's a Guzzlord, and it's the Battle of Dragons. Opponent firing off the Dragon Claw. I will immediately commit the shield, and in these shielded situations, this is when Brick Break is so deadly, because you can shield the damage from Brick Break, but the defense drop applies anyway. So now the defense has been lowered. Hakamo'o forces the simultaneous KO. 1 Volt Switch KOs the Skarmory, and we're able to take the win. Moving into the next match, leading Shadow Magnezone into a non-Shadow Abomasnow. This is a very nice lead for the Magnezone. I'm extremely weak to Ice in the back. The goal of the Shadow Gligar save switch is often to bait out either some kind of a Fairy type like a Azumarill, or if I can bait out an Ice type. But in this case, I catch the Ice type on the lead, so this is terrific. They go for the Weather Ball. I fire off the Mirror Shot right away. They make a nice catch onto Lantern, and they get the Spark through. I'm going to throw 2 more Volt Switches so I can bank that Mirror Shot and send in Hakamo'o, and Hakamo'o just completely destroys these poor Lanterns. They go for the Thunderbolt. That does nothing. I'm going to go for a Brick Break and then just go for a full farm down now, because Brick Break not going to do a ton of damage, but it does come with that defense drop, so I can get the full farm down, and I should be able to make it to a Brick Break versus my opponent's Abomasnow if that's what they decide to send in. The Abomasnow is already taking some damage, but they send in their final Pokemon, which is Jellicent. Jellicent will be met with the Dragon Claw. I have no plans whatsoever here to end up going for a double resisted Brick Break. I'm just going to keep firing off the Dragon Claws. Unfortunately, the opponent does end up lagging there, so they do miss a Hex, which is a bit unfortunate. They're going to be firing off a Surf. They are extremely low at this point. I should just be able to send in the Magnezone, commit the shield, and then they're forced to switch out into this Abomasnow. In comes the Abomasnow. I have back-to-back Mirror Shots, and the moment they shield this, I'm just going to switch into the Gligar, because Wing Attacks hit for super effective damage. The Wing Attack goes through, so I will commit the shield, so this way the Wing Attack that snuck will register. They're forced to fire off their last second Weather Ball. This is double super effective damage, but Shadow Gligar does not care, withstanding the damage, Wing Attacking down the Jellicent, and taking the win. Moving into the next match, terrible lead, Shadow Magnezone versus Annihilate. I'm going to save switch into the Gligar. Opponent responds with Skarmory, and I have just been completely hard countered. Oh my goodness. Dig, not going to do a whole lot to the Skarmory. I am going to use this as an opportunity to try and get energy on the Magnezone, because of course Wild Charge can potentially threaten a shield from that Annihilate. I fire off the Dig. Dig is going to be no-shielded by my opponent. They're going to get the farm down. I'm going to be sending in the Magnezone. Magnezone looking for the farm down. Opponent is going to be firing off the Brave Bird. Brave Bird does damage, and of course, it does lower their defense, so I only get 2 Volt Switches instead of 3. I send in Hakamo'o. They're farming up energy with the Annihilate. They build up to the potential Shadow Ball. I'm going to commit the shield. Opponent baits with the Night Slash in the back. They have Lantern. Is this winnable? This is going to be tough. I fire off the Brick Break right away. Brick Break will come with that guaranteed defense drop. Opponent is going to start firing off Surf. Surf is going to connect. I'm going to throw 3 Dragon Tails and then go for the Dragon Claw. I need this Dragon Claw plus 1 Dragon Tail to KO, and then I have a chance. The Dragon Claw connects. The Dragon Tail KOs. Maybe there's a chance. In comes Annihilate. I'm going for the Brick Break, needing that defense drop. The Brick Break does get shielded. Their defense has been debuffed. It all comes down to this. Can I Volt Switch down? They let the Volt Switch through. Oh my goodness, this is going to be really, really close. Can we overcome Hard Counter City? No, the opponent barely makes it to the Night Slash. That KOs the Magnezone, and we lose a heartbreakingly close game. Looking for redemption in the next match, and what a lead. Shadow Magnezone into Mantine. Opponent save switches into Annihilate. My switch is just incredibly slow, and I'm just playing this so poorly. And I end up shielding after in a previous match. I was like, I try not to shield here, but I chickened out. I shielded. I stayed in. I took a ton of counters on that Magnezone. This is basically a tutorial of how not to play this team just in this particular game. Even though I've had a completely dominating lead win and a very good counter switch. Oh my goodness. The Aerial Ace, it's debuffed, so it's not going to be doing a whole lot of damage. I could have potentially thrown the first Aerial Ace before they debuffed me, but I honestly wasn't expecting them to have Bubble Beam, as a lot of Mantines I've been seeing have either Ice Beam or Water Pulse as their secondary move. They go for the Aerial Ace, that picks up the KO. In comes the Magnezone. They send in Whiscash, and I'm going for the Wild Charge. This hits hard, even though it's resisted. Opponent commits the shield. I can send in the Hakamo-O. They are farming up so much energy, I may as well go for the Brick Break. Let's get that guaranteed defense drop onto the Whiscash. Whiscash is going to let this through. They farm up so much energy that I'm genuinely worried they have a Blizzard. So I commit the shield. It's not the Blizzard, it's the Mud Bomb. But then they farm up again. I'm like, did I seriously run into the only Blizzard Whiscash in this entire game? But thankfully, no. It's just a Mud Bomb. We are okay. I should be able to KO with 1 more Dragon Tail, but the clock's up. In comes the Mantine. Mantine is able to snipe with the Aerial Ace, but now I can just send in the Magnezone. Magnezone is going to get the farm down. Whiscash unable to make it to a move, so they resign the match. We see a tricky lead in the next match, Shadow Magnezone versus Shadow Gligar. On paper, this seems like Magnezone's worst nightmare, but Magnezone can outpace to the first move, and if a Shadow Wild Charge lands, which it does, that does so much damage to the Gligar. So even though the team is ABA weak to the Gligar, a lot of people just don't respect the fact that Shadow Magnezone deals monster damage with Wild Charge, and even resisted, you can effectively render that Shadow Gligar useless for the remainder of the match. And if they're leading a Shadow Gligar, odds are they're probably weak to Hakamo-O in the back. In comes the Hakamo-O. Hakamo-O does get the farm down. Goodra, unfortunately, only has resisted moves versus other dragons. In the back, it's a Go-Goat, so we have the battle of the Brick Breakers. In the 2-shield, I should probably just go straight Brick Break here, but it was good timing to throw at when I got to the Dragon Claw, so I just went for it. My opponent is going to go for the Brick Break, but realistically, we're in a very good spot here with the Hakamo-O. I'm going to be committing the shield. My opponent has heavily debuffed me here with the Brick Break. They send in the Gligar, but I'm able to get the snipe with the Magnezone. Back in comes the Go-Goat. I'm low enough that I think I will actually need to shield this, as I don't think that I can survive a Vine Whip on the Hakamo-O, but we're able to take the win, and the opponent unfortunately does get KO'd with both shields remaining. We've got the Battle of Magnets in the next match, Shadow Magnezone versus Shadow Magnezone. My Magnezone is extremely high attack. This is not intentional. This is just the only Great League eligible Shadow Magnezone that I have. So that's why it ended up the way that it is. I'm going to commit the shield. Opponent is going to full send the Wild Charge. They save switch into a Gligar. And you know what? It's Shadow Wild Charge time. This Wild Charge connects. That does monster damage. I'm going to look to bank a little bit more energy on the Magnezone before I send in my own Gligar. My opponent is going to be firing off the Aerial Ace that is going to connect. I'm going to be able to actually not go for Charge Attack priority here because I would get farmed down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let myself get as low as possible and then fire off this Aerial Ace. Aerial Ace is going to be able to pick up the knockout. My opponent sends in their final mon, which is Shadow Dragonite. I send in the Hakamo-O. This is looking pretty good for me here, but the opponent gets the CMP Sack Swap, and that wins them the game. Just unbelievable play by my opponent. The Dragon Claw will connect. I can send in my own Magnezone and farm down, but I'm now too low on my Magnezone. The Dragonite will be able to farm me down, and I don't think Hakamo'o is actually going to be able to fire off a Dragon Tail. In comes the Hakamo'o. Oh, I get the Dragon Tail, but they survive on 1 HP, and I just got outplayed. Massive props to my opponent. Hopping into the final match, leading Shadow Magnezone into Alolan Sandslash. Alolan Sandslash definitely does seem like a core breaker to the team, but Magnezone can handle it pretty decently. I bait with the Mirror Shot, I actually get the attack drop. Even without the attack drop, you can do pretty well with the Magnezone as long as shields are up. They're going to bait with the Ice Punch. I decided to bait again. I really shouldn't bait here because this is a really easy no-shield for my opponent, because if it's a Mirror Shot, they can withstand the damage and make it to one final Drill Run. So I unfortunately am going to get KO'd there, but this does set up my Gligar for a very nice farm. I now have energy on the Gligar. Opponent has a choice to make. What do they want to send in? They send in their own Gligar, and this is so good for me, as this way their Gligar does not end up hitting for super effective damage on my Hakamo'o. I continue to farm. They go for the Aerial Ace. That's very, very okay by me, as I have the energy advantage. I can overfarm slightly, go for the Aerial Ace. This will knock out. Let's see, are they willing to burn that final shield? Opponent is not. They get KO'd. In the back, it's Sableye, and I can send in Hakamo'o. Hakamo'o continuing to farm. If I shield the return, then this game is just over. I shield the foul play, and that makes things tricky. I believe I should be able to make double Dragon Claw, but it's going to be really close. I get the shield from the opponent, and I make it the Dragon Claw number 2. I thought about the Brick Break, but I needed the cheaper energy Dragon Claw in this moment, and the opponent is going to get farmed down. So despite seeing a couple Glygars to end it, which the team is pretty weak to, we are able to get some wins. All in all, I do think that this is a really good climbing team. It definitely does require a little bit of nuance, as Shadow Magnezone is a decently unwieldy Pokemon to use, considering that it has monster damage output, but it is very frail. A little bit like Shadow Gallade in that way, where it is incredibly powerful, but it can take some practice to really get comfortable with using it. Overall, I'm a big believer in this team and the team archetype as a whole. Shadow Magnezone with a Shadow Gligar save switch and a dragon in the back. I've run Goodra. I had very positive sets. I went 20-5 today with Hakamo'o in that role, and I imagine other dragons, like we saw my opponent have a Shadow Dragonite in that slot. This archetype of a team is extremely strong in this current meta, and Shadow Magnezone, people are just not preparing for it. Granted, now that I make a video, they could start preparing for it, but at the current moment, people are just not respecting Magnezone as an entity, and as a result, it is able to get a massive amount of wins. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you, as always, to our members here on YouTube. The support guys provide is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.